session on, welcome everybody. This is the fifth session on a training series, which is targeting the African farmers organizations, and it's focusing on climate negotiations. My name is Tina Hovio, and I work for Food and Forest Development Finland, where I act as executive director. We are one of the organizing parties of the coalition which is behind this. Among the other organizations, I would like to mention Pan-African Farmers Organization, the World Farmers Organization, Andreas Hermes Academy, and Deutscher Bauernverband. I share very rapidly a slide just to remind you who are the speakers of today and what are the key topics that we are going to go through. So today our topic is really focusing on the Dubai climate meeting, COP28, which were the insights and takeaways from the meeting, and what are the next steps, and this in particular from the point of view of the African farmers and farmers organizations. We had three speakers today. We wanted to have kind of a different point of views. We have Dr. Keris Jones, who has been coordinating the farmers constituency and who attended the whole meeting in Dubai. We have Mr. Mitika Mwenda from Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. I hope that Mitika, the letters are in the right order, but you can maybe correct. Mitika is coming from Kenya. And then we have Dr. Ibrahim Togola, who is from Mali, and he's here on behalf of Mali Folke Center, who is supporting farmers and farmers organizations in Mali, in West Africa. We have the interpretation. So on the bottom bar, you can select the globe, and you can select between the interpretation. We have agreed that Dr. Togola will give his speech in French. And after the presentations, we have a session on question and answers. And you can use either of the languages to ask your questions. The key topics is really what happened in Dubai COP28. What are the main takeaways? And in particular, what this means for the agriculture as a sector and for farmers. What happened behind the scene? In particular, the negotiation as regards the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work on implementation and climate action on agriculture and food security. We had the decision on loss and damage fund. It would be interesting to hear the views of the presenters on potential roles of farmers' organization in this. And then, learning how to deal with approaches, lobbying, how to create leverage for farmers' constituency, farm organizations, and agriculture as a sector in general. Some views on global stock taking, and maybe some words also on the national determined contribution, which are being renewed before the next meeting that will take place in Bonn, SB 59. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Keris Jones to share her views on what happened. Is this good or bad for the farmers' organizations? And what are the next steps? Please, Keris, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tina, for your excellent chairmanship. And thanks also to PAFO and AHA and WFO, DBV, and I'm sure I've forgotten an organization for this invitation to come and speak to you again. Lovely to have some familiar friends in the participants list. So I'm going to pick up some of the themes that Tina raised in her introduction. And as she did, I'm just going to share my screen, I hope. I hope you can see that. If somebody can't, then please shout. And I only have 2 or 3 slides, because as Tina said, we want to use this session, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your experiences and reflections of COP28, whether it was in the preparation phase or the training that you had last year, or whether you were in COP in Dubai in person. The communication that you received before and during the COP, and how your understanding of the process has improved or not, and how that helped you be better engaged, whether with your national governments before you came to the COP, or whether it was at the COP itself. And in all these, there is no right answer to these questions. It's such a big subject. It sometimes can be difficult, even when you have lots of information. It can sometimes be difficult to know where to start. So really looking forward to your reflections. And then, as Tina said, how can we use what we learned from last year to do better and to look forward, not only to the COP this year in November, but beyond that? So what is it that we as farmers' organisations and the farmers' constituency in the process can realistically achieve? What needs to happen to do this? And importantly, who can help us? Because we can't do this on our own. So I just want to look back and pick up some of the items that Tina mentioned in her presentation. Look back at what happened at COP28 and look at both the key negotiations and also some of the things that happened outside the negotiations. And you have a version of this slide. I'm not going to read it all. I put in some extra text, but I can send these to Shadrach after this presentation. So some of the key negotiating items at COP28, which led to significant decisions, was the agreement on new funding arrangements for the Loss and Damage Fund. And that will help developing countries, but not all developing countries. It's developing countries that are particularly vulnerable. And maybe the other speakers or participants in this webinar might have a view of what that is. Then Tina also mentioned the really big negotiation stream in this COP was something called the Global Stocktake. So that aims to provide guidance to all governments on how to increase climate ambition. It's been a 2-year process, which finished with an agreement in Dubai, and the farmers' constituency and farmers' organisations felt it was very important that farmers and agriculture was recognised in this document. There were some positive mentions of agriculture and food, particularly in relation to adaptation, which of course is very important to developing countries. But unfortunately, for many in the farmers' constituency, farmers were not particularly identified as having an important role in supporting governments and contributing to collective progress. And as farmers' organisations, we want to understand why that is, because we think farming is part of the solution, but it doesn't feel as if others feel the same. But of course, to some in the farmers' constituency, this is also not important. So perhaps it'll be interesting to have a discussion about why that is, or whether it's important at all. And then Tina, also in the negotiation space, Tina talked about the Sharm el Sheikh agriculture negotiations, which failed again. And personally, I think this is just disgraceful. These are negotiations on technical subjects which are really important to us, but actually should not be failing because parties can't agree, even on subjects to talk about. So, as the farmers' constituency said during the COP, a failure to agree a way forward was a failure for farmers. So that's in the negotiation space. Outside the official negotiations, the UAE presidency of the COP launched a range of initiatives on agriculture and food, mostly focused on developing countries and on improving resilience. These are all important things. And there's a link there to the range of initiatives. However, whilst that's really positive, it's very hard to identify where farmers' organisations were involved in the development of these initiatives. They still feel very top down. And again, that's something we might want to think about as we move forward. And then finally, looking forward, what's happening this year and looking forward to COP30 in Brazil in 2025. So in a few months' time, we have the intersessional, the Bond Climate Conference, where it's like a mini COP. So governments will be in Germany to do negotiations. And it's there, we hope, that we will get agreement on the Sharm agriculture roadmap. So we're not just talking about talks, we're actually talking about things that are important to our sector. And then secondly, at the COP itself in November in Azerbaijan, what should be agreed is this new collective quantified goal on finance. So that's a sum of money that will replace $100 million that was promised by developed countries to developing countries that has finally been achieved. So this will be agreeing on the new goal, on what developed countries will make available to developing countries to help support climate resilience and mitigation. And the COP presidency itself it's way too early in the morning, sorry. The COP presidency itself has also been talking about the things that are important to it, what might be its priorities for its COP. So it's highlighted the importance of technology transfer, of course, very important to developing countries, water security, and peace, not surprising with the state of the world in its as we find it currently. And then finally, as Tina mentioned, this year governments will be working on their NDCs, their nationally determined contributions. These are plans that each government will be putting together to submit to the UNFCCC. It has to submit these, I think, before February next year. And in there to be setting out its plans for the entire economy to reduce emissions. So for us as farmers' organisations and the farmers' constituency, we want to influence what's in those plans and to understand what they might say about agriculture. So I'll stop there and look forward to the conversation and hearing from other speakers. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you, Caris. Caris gave a good overview. I would suggest that we go through all three presentations in the row, and then we have more extensive time for questions. I hope that this is all right for all of you. And I would then ask Mr. Mitika to focus on and give his views. What happened? What's positive, negative? And what are the next steps, especially from the point of view of farmers' organizations? Please, Mr. Mitika.
Yeah. Thank you, Tina. And let me say once again, greetings to you all, and also for inviting me to share my perspectives of the constituency which I belong indirectly, because everybody in Africa is a farmer. And agriculture as a key sector driving Africa's development and the livelihoods of millions of people, then should be a very, very important sector in the international dialogue on climate change. I just want to just go back and refer you to the objective with which the climate change convention was established way back 30 years ago, and the thinking about what really those forefathers were thinking about: stabilization of climate system and avoiding dangerous interference with the climate system. But even during that time, Article 2 of the convention was very clear. I'm not going to mention the whole paragraph, but I will capture the one which talks about agriculture or food. So it starts by talking about stabilizing the climate system in such a level should be achieved within a time frame sufficient to allow ecosystems to adapt naturally to climate change, to ensure, and bold this, to ensure that food production is not threatened, and to enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner. So what does that mean? They acknowledged, even the framers of the convention acknowledged, that we need really to ensure that that food system is not threatened and disrupted, because they saw that climate system was affecting food 30 years ago. The big challenge then was that all that time until 2017 is when we were able, after a big fight, as the civil society, including African civil society, to ensure that at least agriculture is meant a track. And that was the birth of the Coronovia, joint work for agriculture. It has not been easy, but at least at that moment, we have seen now agriculture incrementally becoming a key subject in the negotiation. Until now, what we are calling Sharm el-Sheikh joint work on implementation of climate action. And with the expiry of Coronovia, and we needed something better. The service has mentioned many things I will not repeat. But as we are working, I'm speaking here, we had a post meeting here in Addis Ababa, where I am, at the sidelines of that 7th Assembly of Heads of States and Governments of the African Union. And the past 2 days, we were reflecting on the outcomes, the way we are doing here, but broadly. What really we did not see, even in this discussion, and this is what we need to improve, is the agricultural community, the farmers. We didn't have, not that we did not invite them. And this is one of the things, as I now unpack what really happened there. One thing I want to mention, this is actually the way forward which we have to take, is let us not work in silos. If we want a farmer's voice to be strong, don't think, I want to caution that working alone as farmers organization will be difficult to win you anything in this, what I call forest. Negotiations are difficult. We need to work together, farmers groups, those who work in the civil society, the youth groups, the climate justice movement, civil society, NGOs, so that we identify and we are not, we ensure that this issue captures the imaginations of the negotiators. So this is one of the things which we need to do. I will not take you to all the history, because if I am given time, I can take even 3 hours really to outline this. Let's go through very key issues which are very important. First and foremost, you realize that the negotiations about agriculture were outside the negotiations, which means we have a bigger war to fight to ensure that agriculture is mainstreamed in the negotiations, like other issues like energy, like other issues, nature-based solutions, and like other very important sectoral issues. That is now the biggest disadvantage. When you are peripheral, because now during the side events, the meetings besides the real negotiations, now you have been relegated, and you can only do things at the sidelines. It is never going to go into the decisions. And that is what we show inside the negotiations and in the build-up to SB 28. And many parties, of course, met to discuss, and this was through the generosity of the president, the UAE, and the co-facilitators. And this was just to operationalize what we are calling more and more workshops without really trying to see how this can be a negotiating track like any other. So then, this was then to engage how they want the roadmap to be done, the work plan, and the online portal operationalize that, discuss structure and elements and synthesis of the report. The question, because we were also concerned as the civil society, the main platform in Africa, we held a conference in Nigeria, the first inaugural conference for climate change adaptation acceleration in Africa conference. And why we were doing that is doing the same what I'm saying, to ensure that we rally our voices to the sector which matters a lot for Africa. I know we had invited a number of you, and we did it with even East African Farmers Federation. But moving forward, we need to do how we can make this even better so that we amplify our voice. I can assure you, I have attended the last 10 COPs. My experience is that if a subject is not loud, forget about it. You need to be loud, and you need really to build bridges. And this is what we need to do. So then I want to move to some of then what really generally happened on food security. There were we witnessed the FAO meeting. But before I go to that, is then everything now has been pushed forward. And this is very unfortunate, because there was that traditional North-South division tensions that when when the G77 and China tried really to ensure that they anchor this work program into the negotiations, they got resistance from the industrialized countries. That has been what has been happening. So then the negotiations closed with a procedural conclusion, and the SBI, that is a subsidiary body for implementation and the technological advice, they agreed then to defer the matter to SB 60 in June this year, and into the current informal note prepared by COP59. I believe that we need really to discourage more and more meetings, workshops. These do not work for us. It's this pressure we need really to ensure that we put don't know how much time I have, because now I want to mention a number of related agriculture food security. The FAO roadmap, which I know most of you are very familiar, on UN Food and Agriculture Organization, to put its foot down. But that's intergovernmental. It can do very little. It doesn't have that real muscle, though it can put together very good reports. But the question is, where can reports cast? We need to translate these reports into action. And action includes changing, of course, they are talking about changing food taxes, subsidies to provide consumers with incentives. But this is really, again, making food more and more, taking it to more commodifying nature and really removing this control of food systems from farmers, smallholder farmers. So we have concerns about this. Of course, talking about improving food production, harvesting and distribution, but who is doing that? Is it the farmer who is doing that? Those are the challenges which we have. Then number two is the declaration, the UAE Declaration on Agriculture, Food Systems and the Climate Action, which of course many farmer organizations were part of. I know Elizabeth was very keen. She was in the advisory committee. Elizabeth of the former chair of PAFO. And the question then, it has generated now up to 159 signatories. But the question is, this is just again other, a game of musical chairs. How will this help African farmers and smallholder farmers for that matter? What do you have? You are aware that on point number 3 is the mobilization of 7.1 billion during the COP for climate positive action in the food system sector. We are running a project in partnership with EAF, and we have a workshop today. I've come out of it. Question I'm asking is called need adaptation. This money which has been mentioned, I just want to believe that it is meant for farmers, is not for only research, the way things have been. Because we have in COPs big pronouncements, but what trickles down to farmers is very little. Is it because we do not have that critical mass which we have to generate? That again is the assignment which we need really to move forward to do. And there is also a 2-year partnership for COP30, and this is another opportunity. Building the momentum on this, so because this was a major announcement made during the Food, Agriculture and Water Day, to launch a 2-year work partnership for COP30 by UAE and Brazil, which is going to host the COP30 in 2025. So as we plan here, Tina, this is an opportunity then for us now to see how do we build a big momentum for farmers moving into this. I'm not saying we should not work with others, but really, how do we ensure that particularly I'm interested in working with the African PAFO and those others to build this. So this is another opportunity. As you were asked about the next steps, we can drive a 2-year joint work here so that we see how we can build that momentum for our demands. Then there is this program which was established called Fresh Water Challenge, whereby the COP28 UAE and partners also announced more than new 30 country members of the Fresh Water Challenge, which commits members to work to protect and restore 30% of the Earth's degraded freshwater ecosystems by 2030. You can see a lot of things there were pronounced. The Joint Sharm el-Sheikh program, also again on the FAO, launched again a program with other partners, with IFAND, on how to finance support for farmers, food producers, and small agribusiness and local farmers. And this is a 3-year initiative to facilitate dialogue and knowledge sharing among farmers. Where are we going to be in here? The question I normally ask, are you on the table or you are part of the menu. And, number 7 is the FAST partnership. Food, Agriculture, Water Day, they launched Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation, FAST partnership. To achieve triple wins for people, climate, the environment. And this is meant to accelerate the transformation of agri-systems. You can see there are so many, and these are FAO, UN. I don't want to say that I have got, I'm sometimes very skeptical about these UN agencies. They launch many things, but what is the stake of farmers there? Finally, is highlights of agriculture and food security from other work streams. And these matters related to food security were also captured in the mainstream, in the work stream. The final text of the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the global goal on adaptation also makes reference to food and agriculture. And this calls on nations to achieve equitable access to sufficient food and nutrition for all, as well as climate resilient food and agricultural production, food supply and distribution. So in ensuring then food security, putting an end to hunger, reducing climate change related vulnerabilities in food production, and safeguarding water systems are all mentioned in the final global stocktake decision text, which is the primary result of what we have been doing in the climate talks. Then finally, it also promotes the application of integrated climate sector solutions, including ecosystem-based methods, sustainable agriculture, resilient food system, and also land use management, which we normally call AFOLU. Let me conclude by saying that it was mixed fortunes for the agricultural sector and the farmers. What matters here, how do we push this to ensure that some of these aspirations are translated into action? And there is no other way that can be done than doing what we are doing right now. Really, conversations are very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitika. There's one question I'd like to ask you before giving the floor to Ibrahim. Because there is now this process of renewing the NDCs. As often, the negotiations start at the country level. So I would like to hear your views. Like, what is the importance that you give to these NDC processes at the country level? And what is your advice for the farm organizations?
Thank you very much. That is a very good question. So I concentrated this because this was negotiations, but coming into countries, NDCs are very, very, very important because the definition of NDCs, those are simply investment tools, countries sectoral thematic investment tools, countries have committed to undertake as part of their NDCs and the Paris Agreement commitment to reduce emissions and build resilience of communities. So the good thing in all countries, particularly in Africa, they view agricultural sector as a very important sector in the achievement of their NDCs. And so they have identified what they are going to do on agriculture. They have, through the partnership with the international organizations like FAO, they have even work plans on agriculture as part of their NDCs delivery. So this then is an opportunity for farmers. We have platforms in 51 African countries, Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and these platforms, they constitute sector thematic areas. And many of them are agriculture tracks. And a number of them are their members, even most of the farmer organizations are their members at the national level. So what we have been doing is to ensure that the more in the agricultural sector, farmers and pastoralist groups and livestock are critical in that. But I can assure you, it is more because the problem with governments, these policies and NDCs and sectoral, now when unpacking those NDCs, particularly in agriculture, they more rely on consultants. So they do very good documents, and that is the biggest challenge we have in the policy making, is that it is there a very good document, but implementation is not there. Why? When it was being designed, the critical actors, like in agriculture, how do you exclude farmers and you expect them now to implement that? So the pressure which we are putting then into governments, and that's one of the resolutions in our planning, which we were doing here, is to ensure that moving forward, we want to see, and this actually we have even agreed with the African Union, is to see at national level critical sectors, including farmers in agricultural sector, are critically involved in the implementation of NDCs. And in some countries, you have good models. Like in Kenya, we have what we are calling the FLOCA, Financing Locally Led Climate Action. If you look, apart from, of course, the NAGRIP, National Agricultural Resilience Program, in many countries, they have standalone agricultural programs funded by FAO and the World Bank. And so what we need to do is to intensify and ensure that FLOCA, because it is targeting locally led climate action at the local level, we integrate sectors like farmers.
Thank you, Mitika. I put on the chat what the NDCs or le CDN in French. It's really the national plan that where the country describes how you're going to reduce your emissions and achieve your climate, adaptation. And it's very important to look at these because there you define what is the role of agriculture and what kind of support should be targeted to the farmers. But as Mitika said, it's not always easy. The pledges are great, the intention is very high, the concrete actions and getting the funding to the lower level is not so good. I wonder if there are any questions at this stage. If not, I would like to continue with Dr. Tokola and then opening the question really, opening the floor to questions and answers. So Ibrahim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dina. Thank you, my brother Mitika, and also thank you, Dr. Series Jonas, who were intervening before me. So I'm very honored to really take part of this very important webinar. Thank you, Tina, for inviting, letting me be in this. I'm Ibrahim Togola. I come from Mali, West Africa, and I'm in renewable energy sectors and sustainable agriculture and climate change. I'm a co-founder of Mali Folk Center, NYETA, which is Malian NGOs, and also Mali Folk Center is Secretariat for the Mali Climate Networks, and which bring together about 150 NGOs, national and international and private sectors active in the area of climate change, and including also association and cooperative or small farmers. We think we Mitika, of course, is my brother and partners, and we know. Tina, you want to tell something?
Je pense qu'on avait, on s'est
oui.
mis d'accord de le faire en français.
Oui, merci.
We agree that you speak in French. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me that I was to speak in French. I think I'm Ibrahim Togola. I'm the co-founder, the president of the Folk Center in Mali. He's an NGO from Mali specialized working the issues of renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and climate change. Have a secretariat for the network in Mali that brings together different associations that are active in the area of climate change and the issues of development. So we work a lot on policy issues, not just in Mali, but as we work even with Mythica. We've been working together. So for this webinar today, we have important topics, and I'm trying to find my screen so that I can share it with you.
Donc, je vais...
C'est en bas. En bas, tu as le bloc
Oui,
vert.
Yes. Trying to share the screen. Let me see how it goes. I think I'm having a challenge with the Can I share the screen for you? Yeah, let me just, yes. Okay. Thank you. So, as I was saying, I just have 2 slides so that I am able to discuss with you the different aspects, especially when you're talking about the small-scale farmers in Africa. You know that small-scale farmers in Africa, they have the important network, AFSA, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, which brings together that 7 networks where we have the small-scale farmers, pastoralists, and the representatives of the indigenous communities are represented there as well. So with all these actors, of course, all these were really excited at the COP when during the opening they talked about the nationalization of our issues, and we know today the implementation of these issues. As you know, when you talk about the small-scale farmers in Africa, we are talking about a huge percentage of the population. I'm in agreement with what Mideka said that all Africans are farmers, because agriculture is a primary sector in Africa. And it is very useful for Africa. If you take the example of the Sahel countries, and you see 70% of people in this region, they live in the rural setting. can always see that most of Africa most of Africans live in a rural setting, and with our rural background, the communities live. They survive on agriculture, pastoralism, and fishing. And now, when we talk of climate change, and we look for solutions in these, it's a relief for them. And today we observe that the communities, especially in Africa, and especially the most vulnerable countries, they have become very skeptical about these declarations that come from the COPs. I can remind you of when we mentioned how much money we're going to invest in this area. And we've seen that we've had a lot of discussions on how much has been availed since these discussions. Just have announcements during these big meetings, then and it just gives us hope. But people, when they don't see concrete actions, they are really skeptical. And in normal circumstances, post-harvest losses in Africa are very high. In Mali, we go up to 30%. The rest of Sahel also. And most of this is linked to climate change. I give the example of I'm a farmer also. That's why I'll give the example. Last year, I did 5 hectares of rice. And from the 5 hectares of rice, we had a lot of disturbances in the month of September, climate effects. And so I was able to get 25 to 30 per hectare. And this year I did a harvest of 15 bags from the same. Now you can see the reduction. And so there's some of my neighbors, they didn't even harvest anything. I was luckier than them. So you can ask yourself the question, this COP, there was an announcement also from the African Development Bank, which wanted to put $1 billion for agricultural sector for small farmers. That was a big announcement. But today we have some experiences in Africa, and these places where development is happening, but they're asking themselves the same questions, because we are in a setting where we are in an area where people are illiterate. When you tell them to plant sorghum and you give them 1,500 CFA francs, they invest per hectare. Maize is around the same. So the equivalent in euro of 1,500 is about 12 euros, or 10,000 CFA francs per hectare. But when a farmer pays that, it is that is the insurance against drought or flooding, so that the insurance they are supposed to pay. And this is always based on the previous experiences. This year, there was a decision that if a farmer pays 10,000 CFA francs for their maize or rice, because it is not for all the sectors, how are you going to assess that there was a drought? Because you know, today in our system, you can have a pocket of drought in one area, whereas 20 kilometers away, everything is going on well, no drought, or maybe just a few kilometers away. How do you determine? So this the announcement by the African Development Bank is very important, but in practical terms, we want to know how it's going to be done. But that's important. So there were many things that were mentioned during the COP about agriculture, but with the dynamic, the reality, and the new education that we are seeing, it is important for us to see how we can, through the confederation coming together, how we can profit at maximum level from the different opportunities. Also, in terms of certain points. For example, on the work that we do together on agriculture and food security is very important. And of course, there is a disappointment that can be discussed where it comes from. If it comes from Africans or from the rich countries, but it is an observation that even if we see a big interest in African agriculture during the COP, there was very few small-scale farmers. So the negotiators, most of them are civil society actors, and which is also not very well represented. We note that even the youth, I think Mithika mentioned that, we are not seeing them. So the decisions from COP are made at the level of negotiations, and that is at the official level, which means that often we think that it is obvious, and the reality that when you look at the decisions that come out of these negotiations, it is really disappointing for us, because the civil society is the one that is in direct contact with the farmers. But the negotiations happen between countries, and the priorities are different. Our countries want investment. They want to attract investors. They want to export from agriculture. So we have two different priorities. And so it is up to us to see how we can satisfy the needs of development for the country. The reality is that small-scale farmers, which are within the backbone of our countries, are quite marginalized, if I can say that. And this is what creates the disappointment I was talking about. And here again, we can observe it at the world level, where you see that UNFCCC, which is in charge of climate change within the UN, which is in charge of activities, carries out annual assessment on the basis of the engagement commitments by the different countries. When you look at these different organizations and the reports that come from UNFCCC, for example, it is really, we are saying that processing and the small-scale farmers are left out of these reports. The reason that these reports usually are based on what the states agree on, and they really go for their priorities. And this means that for PAFO and other farm organizations, there is still a lot of effort that is yet to be implemented. The beginning is there, but a lot remains to be done. So we have a lot of work. This is an observation that you see also. Something that I mentioned, Mithika mentioned this, that for Mali, I have worked a lot on energy. For example, that's the clean energy in terms of investment. That is for the African countries. We are seeing that in investing in different sectors within the climate change, not very easy. And if we take the countries of Sahel countries, where 70% of the population are in rural setting, and they survive on agriculture, how do you invest in this agriculture to make sure that you can help them get what they need? We have water, we have the sun, we have the youth, so we can really invest in this sector to reduce the effects of climate change, but we do not see how exactly how our agriculture can be an investment, a favorable investment to enable African agriculture, the African agriculture to invest in agriculture. And I'm convinced that if we can transform our agriculture into commercial enterprise, we will convince African investors to invest in agriculture so that we can really transform agriculture. That is what will enable us to create real wealth. But for the moment, I think we really have to, what we have done is just to attract investors from outside. So we need to think about the possibility of attracting local investors also, especially in the area of agroecology and accelerate our effort. And which means that we really have to think about investment and make our countries attractive to investors. We have worked through this area for most of our countries. Ourselves, for example, we have revised our strategy. I don't know whether the other countries have done the same. So finally, for this point, I think that today it is an extraordinary opportunity for Africa and for the producer countries, because people are now more conscious of the implication. And the small-scale farmers are now more organized than before in most countries. And it's now about using the different advantages that they have, especially the communication, so that they can have an influence on the international level. So I think we should also have more partnerships between North and South, South and North, and see the possibilities of how to benefit from this. So myself, I remain optimistic. There's a lot of work. I'm optimistic. I remain optimistic. I know there are many challenges, but the opportunities are there. I think for these, in terms of what concerns the small-scale farmer, I think we can try to see how we can have an influence at this international level. So I don't know whether there are questions, otherwise I'll go to the next about our software. I think the second slide, I'll share it for the next session. I would want to ask you a question before opening up the floor to others. You've mentioned the NDC and the possibility of, you said Mali has made progress. You have a renewable plan. What advice will you give to countries that participate in this meeting? Which are the levels, which are the steps to follow in the renewal of their NDCs, and how can these farm organizations be better represented in this process to defend their interests?
And so in Africa, we make a big mistake usually at the national level. And so the error comes from where? Today, especially the organization of civil societies, when we have national workshops, so if it is on developing documents, this is not of interest, people do not attend them. And so it is actually a policy that we have. And so I would say that, and in my language, we say that if you send your head and you're absent, you're not going to, so when your head comes back, maybe you have shaved wrongly, but when you are present, okay, what does that mean? If you are going, you need to be present, and also your spirit, you should be there, even there in spirit. And so you could be reading the the newspapers and you are talking and you're not concentrating and while you are invited. And so we have many civil society organizations in national events because we have piloted activities in Mali and in Africa. And so if it is not immediate financing, people are not there. And so I would like to invite other participants from other countries because these are documents that are very strategic and so which represent the vision of the country on how the country wants to work on reducing emissions. And so it is the document that speaks, and it speaks on the vision, the strategy of the country. And so I would say that in Mali, for example, when we do these activities, and so the technical services are present, and if you take our example, we have the director, we also have the heads of departments, we also the heads of the other divisions and other sections. And so it is the heads of sections that are sent and on a weaker level. And also the secretaries are sent to these meetings are not those people who are in charge. It could be the secretary or people who are on work study so that they can come up with a document that has importance, is of importance. And so the responsibility is not there. Once the document is done, it has been delegated, and so this is a big risk that we see not only in Mali and also in other countries that I have worked on strategic documents. And so it is important. And so when you have a meeting by World Bank or from European Union, and everybody is always there and is present because it is World Bank, European Union, and there is a possibility for financing. And so the in charge are there. But when it comes to strategic documents, usually those who are in charge are absent. And so this one is usually done without per diem, with so much work during the day. And so this is work that is not attractive and people are not there. So that is the first thing that I would like to note. Secondly, we need to know that when we are in these meetings in developing important documents, you need to come with the leaders, the local leaders, that is the farmers who are living the reality, who are going to testify to say that this is our reality. And so those are the people who will say that they want this and the other because they understand their problems and they know where they're coming from. And so this is going to allow the developments because all of us, we are descendants of farmers. And so maybe even up to 2 generations. And so when farmers speak, when the livestock keepers speak, even the fishermen, even if there's a director or a minister, they already know that their grandparents came from the villages. And so when leaders are involved, they're actually talking to talk about it. It has more impact because they live the reality. And so those are the 2 things I would like to note about this question.
At a very high level, often with actors who are not representing African farmers, and the instruments seem to be, very big, like requiring heavy investment, and often the farmers live in the different kind of a reality. So there's a discrepancy over there. We have also heard that while IFAD assessed a study analyzing how much of climate funding reaches the smallholder farmers in 2020, and then it was 1.7%. In Dubai, the World Rural Forum assessed the same situation, and according to them, the share of climate funding that reaches farmers is going down. It was only 0.3% this time. So I think it shows that the dynamic being discussed and decided in UNFCCC meetings doesn't meet the reality of the farmers. But what was very important that Ibrahim was underlining, he was saying that these are tedious and kind of heavy processes where you have to be present, and it's important to bring people from the rural area to say how they live the situation, etc. So I think that there's already some ideas on the reflection. I would like to open now the floor for discussion. You can ask questions, you can make comments, you can put your questions to the chat using either French or English, or you can ask for the floor. I would like to ask, we have Keris and Ibrahim here, if I could ask Mr. Mitika also to open